So first of all, I just want to go. So yeah, this talk is called "Whose Input Is It Anyway?" So you're in the wrong talk. You can start leaving now. The story that named this talk. So this talk came about because I was working as an application security specialist for a company, and what that meant was that in my office, I work in Amsterdam, or I worked in Amsterdam. If anything, an incident happened to anything that one of the teams in the Amsterdam office worked on, they would come to me, and then I would help coordinate that team's fixes. I would also kind of make sure the whole teams were doing security training or kind of understanding security, trying to make sure that all of our engineers are secure. So we received a report of an XSS on one of our customer support pages, and customer support was based in Amsterdam. I get sent the link, hey, can you verify this? Is it real? We don't know what the hell the XSS is. Does it work? If it's a problem, coordinate the fix. And I looked into it. It's a reflected XSS on a thank you page. So customer sent in a message. We say, thanks for the message. We'll respond to you in a couple of days, let's say. And so I've got to validate it, liaise with the engineering team. And so just for a stupid bit of, it's not going to show up on that screen, so I'm going to pull that across. Let's say that there's a web page here. I'm not going to code up the actual web page, but there's a web page here. I'm serving it on localhost, thanks, with language code on it. And language codes are fairly common when you've got multinational websites because, we present it in a bunch of languages. You say, hey, I need this language to display in French. And then I'm going to call an API, and it's going to get all of the translations of the strings that should appear on that page, but the French versions of it. And so, I validated that the XSS works. It was the lang parameter. But when you're validating things like that, you always get given alerts, and those are really boring, and I hate those. And I've just realized this demo won't work because I'm not actually connected into the internet, and I forgot to do it. But you can have to trust me that if you are in the position where you have to show off to an exec code that there is an XSS on your vulnerability, or XSS on one of your websites, look into a website called Cornify. Cornify provides you with a JavaScript API, and every time you call it, it will put another unicorn on the screen, and then another one. And this script here basically just sets it to put a new unicorn on the screen every 5 seconds, and it's very hackers 1995, but execs get that. They understand that that's really bad if there's unicorns popping up all over their nice screen that they spent, years or thousands of in engineering costs. So rather than just alert one, get yourself a Cornify script and put that in your payloads where possible. This one was really easy because I could literally put as much as I could in. So at this point, I've confirmed that the XSS is a problem. But my job is more than that. My job is not just saying, there's a problem, blah, blah, blah. It's, why did that problem come in place? What's the procedures that we were lacking as a company that led to this problem existing? Is there tools or anything like that? Because we need to fix that. We need to make sure it doesn't happen again. Well, so I'm going to start digging around in the code base, because never trust an engineer, trust the code first. And I kind of find something that looks like this in a code base. And this is kind of classic PHP, unfortunately. There's some HTML above it. There's a script tag that gets opened. And then they put in a language parameter and they take whatever was in the get parameter of the lang, slap it between quotes in the script tag and go, it's fine. Straight into your script tag. Hopefully you all realize why this is really problematic and the stupid amounts of problems there are with this. But, hey, why did this happen? Why did someone think that this was acceptable? So I go and find the person. Git blame is a thing. And I want to talk to them first as opposed to their team because maybe there's something really embarrassing that I have to talk them through first before I do a wider lesson. And so I asked them, why was it coded like that? What is the thing that you were trying to achieve? And they say, well, it's so that we can display the page in the user's language as they were navigating. We need to maintain English, French, Portuguese. Okay, yeah, but why were you putting the language parameter straight into a script tag? You weren't filtering it. You weren't, DOM sanitize anything. No filtration, no checking. It's a country code. Did you at least check it was 2 letters only? Well, it's not user input, is it? We'd set it during navigation. This is a 301 redirect. when you submit your post, we send a 301 redirect, we put the lang parameter in as whatever the customer's account. It's not user data. Well, so whose input is it anyways? And that's really what kind of made me to understand that, especially as security people, we have to recognize where our language is not effective for other people who have different understandings of what that language means. So always remember, language is communication, not code. I don't really care what the meaning of what you say is more important than how you say it. I don't care if you use incorrect grammar when you're saying something, as long as the meaning is put forward. And that's the real thing we need to care about. So when I'm saying to someone, or when you're teaching people in engineering, you're saying, hey, remember to always validate and sanitize user input. You know, OWASP top 10 says injection is a bad thing, so you always sanitize and validate user input wherever possible. And you're thinking to yourself, any user, any data that a user has influence on. And also, because you're a security person, you're not just thinking users, malicious users, attackers, some random script kiddie somewhere out there. Anything someone external to your company can influence. Well, the dev just hears anything that a user types in. That's user input. I don't see why anything else is. You know, again, the server set that URL when it was redirecting. And then you've also got to understand that the devs don't necessarily understand what is vulnerable, and they will have a lot of pressures within their scope that they might not understand the full context of the attack that you've just told them. So this XSS was on the thank you page, and the customer support person, the engineer who had coded that page for customer support, was saying, you know, well, what does it matter if someone gets an XSS on the support pages? They don't get access to the backend database. That's for certain. It's just a reflected XSS. It just presents to the user as something else. They can deface it, maybe. They can throw some unicorns on it. Is that a business impact? Well, it is, because then I had to explain to them, yeah, but I can rebuild our login page inside this page now, and it's being served from our domain. So I send someone a link with it to mycompany.com, and it's got a mycompany.com domain, and it shows up with the login screen that looks exactly like the normal login screen from the same domain. All of the browser things are the same, so they type in their credentials. It ends up being an attack on some other part of our company, but through their issue. And the other thing they said was that, you know, users don't see this page unless they've submitted a message to us. It was the last page in a journey. Well, they didn't really kind of couldn't comprehend the idea that someone would just take the URL as is and send it to someone, just as I'd sent it to them in Teams. This is the link. If you click on it, you get to it. You don't have to go through the whole journey where you post the message first. You can just access that page. But, you know, you're telling devs what is vulnerable, but often we fall back on very easy things if we're in security. What are we going to tell people when there's, you know, hey, we've got to do some security training? Well, we're going to tell them, oh, what's top 10? Learn that. You're secure, right? This covers the attacks that happen all the time. This is the things that are really causing us issues. Learn that. Devs will be secure. Well, that's a lot in there. Especially when we look at how we've been folding more and more things into certain categories. What we just talked about in the XSS was injection. Injection also has SQLI. That's a completely different style of attack to what the XSS is. Injection also has command injections. None of what they were doing would have been, or none of their work would have been impacted by SQLI or command injection. So if they're looking and they say, oh, I'm looking at the injection attacks, there's a lot of content in injection attacks, learning about how to prevent them, that wasn't relevant to them. Maybe there was a sentence down at the bottom that said, oh, and by the way, XSS. Or, well, ideally there's more than that, but you've got to understand that out of the scope of just injection, they had a tiny bit that was actually relevant to them, and maybe they missed it. And you might be saying to yourself, well, it's okay, you know, we've got OWASP Top 10 training, and we have training that repeats every year, and we have some product that, you know, you join the company, you have to have certified yourself in a self-study course. In my experience, self-study courses are rarely effective at fighting misconceptions. Someone comes in going, I know injection attacks. They're that thing where, you know, you hack into a database because you put in a wrong param, or you make it sleep for a while. They know what injection is, so they go, yeah, injection page. Skip to the next bit of it. Let's look on to the other bits that I don't know yet. you're not fighting those misconceptions if people can skip over things. And often I find instructor-led training is better for that because people can ask questions. They can be like, hey, would this also class as that? Or, is this also a problem? What about if they've got a different web browser? They can ask these weird questions, but that really helps them understand the nuance of what you're telling them. It's not just user input. It's malicious users. Anyone can be a malicious user. Anything can be changed. And if you want to understand a bit more about, bad mandatory training, I've done a talk but the slides are available, called Confessions of a Software Dev, where I talk about how, as a software dev, I have ignored training, or how I've got around requirements that have been set for me because it's just not worth my time, right? It's not just me, it's a collection of stories from a bunch of people. Well, what are we going to do as security people? And what I want you to kind of take away is to be more aware of what it's like to be an engineer in a company and not just a security person. Because when I moved into security, I found that a lot of people had some engineering background, or maybe from a while ago, or maybe they never came in from that. Maybe they came in from completely, different set of things. And they never worked in a corporate environment with the pressures and struggles of engineers, let's say. So let's go for a classic one that people like to laugh at, including myself. Front-end devs, they are the shittiest of devs. I have been a front-end dev, so I can say that. I moved out of it as soon as possible. But a good front-end dev, and I will say not all of them look at all of this, but a good front-end dev cares about accessibility. They're checking every web page. Does it have the right array tags? Does it have the right alt text on things? Have we got good contrast between elements? You're making sure things aren't flying in. How is this built so that screen readers can read it correctly, right? Well, they also have to care about customer experience. Research shows that if a page takes more than 1.5 seconds to load, you drop off a whole bunch of traffic. So you need to be presenting something for the user to engage with as fast as possible. And if you're typing into a search box and you type and then a letter appears later, you're going to be infuriated. You're going to think it's crashed. Again, we care a lot about input latencies. We have to care about browser automation testing. Previous person was talking about browser automation. If you're a front-end dev, you have to make sure everything works, everything clicks, everything. You have to learn a completely separate method of testing the web page you just built. See, that's another thing you have to learn about. If you've worked in a bank, you have to care about Internet Explorer 7 for some reason. But all the time there are browsers coming out with new APIs, new things that are happening. There's this new thing in CS styling that you now have to rebuild your web page because we don't use tables for layouts anymore. Please don't use tables for layouts. You've got to make your design cohesive, responsive as you move around your screen. As the person clips it to the right side of their screen, the browser looks different. The web page has got to be still accessible. Every single API that your front end calls has a way it fails. And they have to know about every single way in which it can fail, because if it fails and the browser stops working or the website stops working, customer support calls come in and you get blamed for the fact that, some other person's API started throwing 500s because they didn't scale up correctly. But you have to know that and you account for that in your front end building. And then you have to care about security. After all of that, you also got this other part of your job that wasn't what you signed up to be a front end dev for, telling you, hey, by the way, also there's this other thing. But also, there's a whole bunch of other things there. And one of the ones I want to call out in particular is incidents from teams. As someone who's worked front end and who then worked in authentication for the back end APIs, if anything goes wrong on your website, you as the front end team are the first people to be called out. And your job basically becomes find out whose API failed and actually say that team failed. Subscriptions team is failing at the moment. It's not our fault. So a front end dev actually has a lot of frustrations from just other teams' failures coming through them first, even though, again, it wasn't their job. I recognize the proficiencies of different people and even something that you take for granted. A lot of people will assume everyone else has a knowledge like them. Recognize that your experiences are unique to you and you're the only person who's ever had that chain of experiences in that particular order. It's a great XKDC comic that says, there's 30,000 people every day who are discovering that new thing that everyone should know before they're 30. Right? Knowing what to Google is a skill. Oftentimes, being in security, knowing what phrases are going to go into the search box to get you the information you need is the thing you need to do. And if you're a dev that doesn't really understand security, you're just like, alert 1 is being popped up on my screen. How fix? What is that? As a security person, you go, oh yeah, reflected XSS, and they were using PHP. Is there a DOM sanitization API for PHP? Something like that. And even experts get security wrong. Like we've seen Heartbleed and various other kind of high-profile security products with issues. So don't blame anyone for getting security wrong, right? Only when you know questions do you know answers to things. And that's the first step that you have to get into engineers, is having them be able to ask the right questions. So I already mentioned that all of your unique, your experiences are unique. And if you're sitting in this room and your team isn't, then chances are you're the security person for your team. I don't care what job role you're in, but if you're the person that's here and your team isn't, you're probably the person that people go to for security questions. You're the person that people go, hey, something went weird, or hey, I've got this idea for how we can make things better. They might ask you first. And let's acknowledge that. Let's take on that responsibility. And so I want to give you some ideas on what you can do, things that I found effective. So one of the things I've absolutely loved doing, and one of the things I found really effective, is supporting people who are pretty good. So you're in this room and people come to you with an idea. And let's say, for example, so I had an engineer in my previous company, and their team was being asked to implement something to protect media that was being streamed. And they had been asked to put in some watermarking systems, but they thought it would be much more effective if we really solidified down our player systems on browser. And they wanted to kind of push the business talk away from this watermarking system, which was just going to be like a HTML overlay. They said, that's not going to be effective. What we really need to do is something more like this. But they didn't feel like they had a voice to say that to the business people. They were like, they're not going to trust me. I'm just an engineer. They think I'm trying to get rid of the boring work and do the fun work that I want to do. So he comes to me because I'm a security person, and he talks me through the concept of what he wants to do, and he's asking for acknowledgement. And I say, yeah, that's actually a great idea. Here's some extra things that you can mention as to why what they're trying to do is problematic and thing. But then I said at the end of it, let's go into a meeting with you, your team manager, and whatever business owner we have. You lay out the plan, and all I will do is say yes. And if anyone asks me a question, I will probably just repeat what you said, but I'm just going to say yes. I'm not going to present this idea. This isn't mine. This is your idea. And after that meeting, that person feels really confident. They came up with a security thing. They can do security. They didn't train for it, but they know, hey, this was validated. Everyone in their team knows that person had good security ideas. So now no one has to come to me from that team. They can talk to that person who's already there that they work with day to day. And just leveraging your position as the security person doesn't have to mean you step in and fix everything. It can just mean you support other people who already have good ideas and ease your own load, right? I no longer had to care about that team for a while because they could talk to that dude. Maybe you're working in a bit more of a big corporate scenario and you're looking for, hey, I need something that's written on a month to month, or, something that happens regularly that we can write in our audit reports that we do this. And so this is what I've typically found effective. Security champions, hopefully it's a system you've heard of. So the idea here is that every team has to either assign, designate, or elect a person who is the security champion for their team. That person becomes the main channel of contact into and out of that team. If the team has concerns about something they want to implement or they want to get some more expertise on something, that person is sitting in on every team meeting because they're part of the team, channels that back to security, maybe asks, hey, can we get some budget for this? Or we want to do this. We've got some concerns about this. We've got some things. Equally, if an incident comes in on my end, and it's for that team, I talk to that person first because they know what's going on in that team. And I say, hey, this XSS came in and it was for this page. Can you figure out when that happened? How long has that been active? They resolve all of those situations. Now, if you're going to put out security champions, if that's going to be a thing you want to implement, make sure you're giving them value. So for the previous place I worked, our security champions would have, we'd all have a monthly meeting where we'd get together and chat about what had been happening in either the news or internally in the company. And then we would also, we'd talk about the news and stuff. And then also every quarter we would actually go and do training, and we would usually ask them what they wanted to be trained in. So what topics have you found difficult? What things maybe you're looking at WAFs. Maybe you want to really improve container security. Maybe you want to understand SAST a bit better. Maybe you want to, whatever topics they came to us with, we would arrange training for. And it was only for the security champions because, hopefully they disseminate their knowledge to their teams. But that was their advantage, or that was their additional benefit for being part of this monthly meeting of security champions. Please do postmortems. It's something I push at every company I go into because you'll be surprised that no one does them. But anything that happens, note it down. And people like to not do this because they want to pretend it never happened. But you're losing so much of a knowledge and information resource if you fail to do postmortems. You're losing so much team camaraderie if you fail to acknowledge how we can fail and how we can pick ourselves back up after that. If everyone feels comfortable sharing their failures, then failures get fixed. People don't just let them slide under the rug. Now, a key component of that is being blameless. You can mention team names, you can never mention individual names. And if you're ever taking notes, you do not mention individuals because it is never a personal problem. It is never a problem with a person. It was a problem with a procedure. Whether that be the person failed to follow procedure, well, what controls were there to make sure they were following procedure? So make them blameless, make them record, make them as open as possible. That's often a challenging point, and that's something I had to fight with various incidents we've had where, this one, I agree that maybe only security champions, at least security champions, should be able to see every incident because they need to understand the security posture that they're working within. But I can agree that some of them can't go out further than that. Ideally, anyone on any team can go and view, whatever postmortems have occurred. And this is something that I really wanted to do, but I've yet to find a company to sign off on this. But this is an idea I had. And I think it's got a lot of value in it. As someone who loves being an engineer more than I love managing people who aren't my reports, which is, security often tells people what to do without having the ability to force them to do it. Security team need change too. So if you can get in people who can do the work and you could rotate them through the engineering teams, well, what does that get you? You've got a 3-month rota, let's say, a security expert is going into that team. They're helping develop the security knowledge within that team. Maybe they help implement changes within that team that need to happen. Maybe the team's been putting off implementing a WAF because they're worried, and now they can go ahead and do that. Or, alternatively, the value you're getting is that you are hearing on the ground what is happening within that team. You can really understand the priorities of that team. You can understand, hey, this team seems to have been falling behind in the security training we've been giving them. You find out that team is being hammered by the C-levels because it's the latest market that they're trying to break into, or, we've suddenly got to implement 5 new mechanisms because of something, and security team was unaware of the other pressures that team was part of. So I think having security engineers rotate around and work part-time in security, so they're still, developing for the wider company, but also helping each individual team. It's, again, communication, spreading knowledge, spreading great ideas. So to finish, what I want you to do is to try and understand engineers a bit better. I want you to help engaged people become champions of security within their teams. Get security champions, they'll really help spread the load. It's not just you jumping into every team. And security should be embedded in teams. Ideally, I say put security teams and they rotate around, but security champions is a step towards that already. You've got security sitting in on every meeting, in a way, every prioritization. And make sure to pass everyone's input. Any questions? We've got one at the back. Okay, I'm going to have to move away because I couldn't quite hear that. Okay. So, question is, everything kind of piles up. When does becoming a security champion not become additional work? Unfortunately, it does. But that's why I say you've got to give additional benefits to those people. And ideally, what you're looking at is, as a front-end dev, I came into things looking for all of those issues, right? But when I join a new team, what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out who on this team cares more about this than me, so I don't have to care about it anymore. So I often became the person who cared a lot about accessibility because it seemed like no one else knew what that was. So I became the accessibility person. But I joined another team once where there was a QA tester who was absolutely spot on with that stuff. You know, every screen reader, he knew about it. He was like, we need to do this, this, and this. And I didn't feel like I had to project that anymore. So I could step back from that. And then that led me, like, I have more space to be the security champion. So it is going to be more work to be a security champion. Ideally, you look at how can we spread loads within teams, and that becomes more of a team dynamics problem. How can the team take on this responsibility? Or, you know, how can we address this as a team, but, you know, maybe individuals are taking responsibility. Hopefully that gives you some ideas. Anything else?
I think that's us.
Cool.
Thank you.